My mom texted, "Since you never help, don't expect a dime when I'm gone." I just countered, "Understood." Then I pulled my $150,000 investment from her business. 48 hours later, she was at my place, holding a handwritten apology. I, 32M, stared at my phone screen, reading the text message for the third time. My mom had just sent me the nuclear option. "Since I never help, I shouldn't expect a dime when she's gone." The words burned on the screen like acid. I was sitting in my home office, surrounded by the quarterly reports from 3 different businesses I'd built from scratch over the past decade. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, managing a portfolio worth over $2 million, and my mother thought I never helped with anything. The backstory was simple but painful. 2 years ago, Mom had approached me with her dream of opening a boutique bakery. She'd been talking about it for years, ever since Dad passed away from cancer. The insurance money wasn't enough to both live on and start the business she'd always wanted. That's when I stepped in. I didn't just write a check and walk away. I invested $150,000 of my own money, helped her find the perfect location, connected her with my contractor who gave her a family discount, and even designed her entire point-of-sale system. For 6 months, I spent every weekend helping her set up, organizing inventory, training her on the business software, and building her social media presence. The bakery took off faster than either of us expected. Within 8 months, she was pulling in consistent monthly profits and had a waiting list for custom wedding cakes. I was proud of her, proud of what we'd built together. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. She started making comments about how I was too busy with my own life to care about family. When I missed her birthday dinner because I was closing a deal in Chicago, she gave me the silent treatment for a week. When I couldn't help her move some equipment because I was in the middle of my own business crisis, she made passive-aggressive comments about how successful people forget where they came from. The final straw came 3 weeks ago. My younger brother had gotten himself into financial trouble again. He'd borrowed money from Mom and couldn't pay it back. Instead of dealing with him directly, she expected me to bail him out. When I explained that I'd already lent him money twice in the past year and he'd never paid any of it back, she accused me of being selfish and abandoning family. That's when the guilt trip started. Text messages about how she sacrificed everything for her children. Phone calls about how disappointed Dad would be in the man I'd become. Comments about how money had changed me. So when I received that text message about not expecting anything from her estate, something inside me snapped. Not because I cared about inheritance money, but because of the complete dismissal of everything I'd done for her. I typed back a simple response, "Understood." Then I opened my laptop and started making calls. First, I contacted my lawyer. The investment agreement I'd made with Mom was ironclad. I'd structured it as a convertible loan with specific terms for early withdrawal. She'd signed everything, though I doubted she'd read the fine print carefully. The agreement stated that I could call in the full amount with 72 hours notice if certain conditions were met, including material changes to our business relationship. Next, I called my accountant to discuss the tax implications of withdrawing the investment. It would be complicated, but manageable. By the end of the day, I'd sent Mom a formal notice through my lawyer. The $150,000 needed to be repaid within 72 hours, or I would take legal action to recover my investment plus interest and fees. The total amount had grown to nearly $180,000 with the accumulated returns and contractual interest. I knew she didn't have that kind of liquid cash. The bakery was profitable, but not enough to generate that much cash flow immediately. Most of her money was tied up in equipment, inventory, and the lease deposit. For 48 hours, my phone stayed silent. No angry calls, no guilt trips, nothing. I almost started to feel guilty myself. Almost. On the third day, I was reviewing contracts in my home office when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I saw Mom's old Honda. She sat in the car for nearly 10 minutes before getting out. When I opened the door, she looked smaller somehow. Her usually perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing the same clothes I'd seen her in 2 days earlier. In her hands was a handwritten letter. She asked if she could come in, and I stepped aside. We sat in my living room, the same couch where we'd planned out her bakery business 2 years ago. She handed me the letter without saying anything at first. Her handwriting was shaky, nothing like the confident script I remembered from childhood birthday cards. The letter was 3 pages long, but the core message was simple. She was sorry. She admitted that she'd been taking her grief about Dad out on me. She acknowledged that I'd done more for her business than she'd ever properly thanked me for. She confessed that she'd been jealous of my success and had somehow convinced herself that my financial independence meant I didn't need family anymore. But the part that hit me hardest was when she explained that she'd been scared. Scared that now that she was financially stable, I wouldn't need to stay connected to her anymore. The guilt trips and complaints weren't really about the money or the help. They were about her fear of losing the last parent-child dynamic we had left. She told me she'd spent the last 2 days calling everyone she knew, trying to figure out how to come up with the money. She'd talked to the bank about a loan against the bakery, reached out to Dad's old business partners, even considered selling her car. But in the end, she realized that losing the money would hurt less than losing me. I watched her sitting there, holding the letter she'd just read aloud, and felt something shift inside my chest. The anger I'd been carrying for weeks started to dissolve, replaced by something more complex. I told her I appreciated the apology, and I meant it. But I also explained that I needed her to understand something important. My success hadn't made me less family-oriented. It had made me more protective of my boundaries. When people tried to manipulate me through guilt or obligation, it made me want to distance myself, not get closer. She nodded, tears streaming down her face now. She asked if there was any way to fix this, to go back to how things were before. I thought about it for a long moment. The truth was, I didn't want things to go back to how they were. I wanted them to be better. I made her an offer. I would forgive the debt entirely, but with conditions. First, she needed to acknowledge that our relationship was a partnership between two adults, not a parent-child dynamic where she could guilt me into compliance. Second, if she needed help in the future, she needed to ask directly instead of using manipulation tactics. Third, we needed to have regular, honest conversations about our expectations of each other. She agreed immediately, almost desperately. But I held up my hand and told her I wasn't finished. The fourth condition was the most important. She needed to have the same conversation with my brother. His financial irresponsibility wasn't my problem to solve, and she needed to stop trying to make it my problem. If she wanted to help him, that was her choice, but she couldn't use our relationship as leverage to pressure me into bailing him out. She was quiet for a long time after I finished speaking. Finally, she asked if I really thought we could rebuild what we'd lost. I told her honestly that I didn't know. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But I was willing to try if she was willing to do the work. Update 1. 3 weeks later, Mom called me with an update. She'd had the conversation with my brother, and it hadn't gone well. He'd accused her of choosing me over him and stormed out. But she'd stood her ground and told him that she loved both of us equally, but wouldn't enable his poor decisions anymore. She'd also started seeing a grief counselor, something I hadn't even suggested, but she'd decided to do on her own. She told me she was beginning to understand how much of her behavior over the past 2 years had been about processing Dad's death, rather than anything I'd actually done wrong. The bakery was thriving. She'd hired a part-time assistant and was considering opening a second location. More importantly, when she told me about these plans, she asked for my advice rather than expecting me to automatically invest or get involved. I found myself looking forward to our weekly coffee meetings again. The conversation felt more balanced, more like two adults discussing their lives rather than a parent lecturing a child or a child being guilted by a parent. Update 2. 2 months after the confrontation, my brother finally reached out. He didn't apologize, but he did acknowledge that he understood why I'd been frustrated with the constant requests for money. He asked if we could start over, and I agreed to have coffee with him. During our conversation, he revealed something I hadn't known. Mom had been supplementing his income for over a year, not just bailing him out of emergencies. She'd been giving him money for rent, groceries, even entertainment expenses. No wonder he'd never learned to manage his finances properly. I suggested he might benefit from talking to a financial advisor, and surprisingly, he agreed. I didn't offer to pay for it, and he didn't ask me to. It was a small step, but it felt significant. Mom and I decided to restructure our business relationship entirely. Instead of my money being a loan or investment, I became a silent partner with a clearly defined ownership percentage. She maintained full operational control, but I received quarterly reports and had input on major decisions. It felt more professional and sustainable. Update 3. 6 months later, our family dynamic had completely transformed. Mom had made genuine progress in therapy and had stopped using guilt as a communication tool. My brother had gotten his finances in order and hadn't asked anyone for money in 4 months. The most surprising development was that my relationship with both of them had actually become stronger than it had been before the crisis. By forcing us to address our underlying issues instead of just papering over them, the confrontation had cleared the air in ways I hadn't expected. Mom's bakery had become successful enough that she was considering franchising the concept. She approached me about potentially investing in the expansion, but this time she came with a complete business plan, financial projections, and a clear proposal for terms. It was the kind of professional presentation I would have expected from any business partner. I realized that my harsh response to her manipulative text message had actually been exactly what our relationship needed. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose something in order to save it. By being prepared to walk away entirely, I'd forced all of us to examine what we actually wanted from our family relationships. The handwritten apology she'd brought to my house was now framed in my office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that even the most damaged relationships can be repaired if both people are willing to do the honest work required. Looking back, I understood that her original text message hadn't really been about money or inheritance. It had been a desperate attempt to maintain control in a relationship where she felt powerless. My response had called her bluff, but more importantly, it had forced both of us to be honest about what we actually needed from each other. The $150,000 I'd been prepared to lose had ended up buying something much more valuable, a genuine, adult relationship with my mother built on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. Sometimes the best investment you can make is the one you're willing to walk away from.